I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer at Gold Derby, and I am joined today by Samira Wiley, who stars as Moira on The Handmaid's Tale, the fourth season of which is currently airing on Hulu. So, Samira, I've asked some of your co-stars this very same question, but now that we are 4 seasons in and you've been playing this character for 4 seasons now, do you feel like you're slipping into entirely familiar shoes whenever you're playing Moira? Or are you still in the process of discovering some of her complexities?
I think it's a little bit of both. And it feels so wonderful to be able to slip into familiar shoes, but also as an actor, I think I always want to be making those discoveries, always figuring out new things about different characters that I'm playing. So when I'm able to, especially getting material from the writers and being able to find different pockets of Moira and how she may, handle every different situation, like especially in season 4, we see her actively in a relationship. We know about her fiance who she had in the past, who's passed, but we're able to see how she loves, how she flirts in this season. And that's something I've never been able to explore before on camera with Moira. So a little bit of both.
And how did you initially craft this character? Was the source material your main go-to? And what were some of the conversations you had with Bruce Miller, the showrunner, early on? I spoke to your co-star, Madeline Brewer, last week, who said that he told her that Janine was based in part on someone he knew in his life. So did you have similar conversations with him?
No, I think, for me, Moira was a character originally in the source material in the Handmaid's Tale book by Margaret Atwood. So I read the book, but also she's not really that well fleshed out in the book. So for me, I think mostly the character came through really relationship with Lizzie on screen, and who Elizabeth Moss created June to be. Through us working out those flashback scenes and figuring out our relationship, that's really, I feel like, where Moira found her shape, more so than conversations with Bruce. I think it really just happened organically on camera with Elizabeth. She's such an amazing actress, and being able to be, scene partners with her really, really helped flesh that out for me.
Oh, very interesting. And one of the most consequential lines from this show is Moira telling Emily in the 3rd season that no one is talking about a happily ever after in Canada, just after, because Gilead is within you. At which stage is Moira in her own mental and physical recovery at the outset of the 4th season?
I know that Moira is honestly really just looking for something to be easy. She has had a very, very, very hard time. I think anyone who has, who can say they're an ex-handmaid living in Little America in Canada hasn't had the easiest life. And she, even though I think those are those are obviously the words that she used in season 3. I think she's looking for what kind of happiness can be attached to my after. There is a really amazing co-parenting relationship that she has created with Luke when it comes to their surrogate parent ship. I don't know if that's a word, of Nicole. And as I mentioned, Una, there's a relationship there, a romantic relationship there. So I think that she is, looking for the after, but right now I do think maybe she's hesitant to say she's looking for some happiness in her after, but I can see that, as playing Moira, that she's definitely looking for that, and she's looking for the easy in it, and I think she's finding some of it. I think she's definitely finding some success in that area.
Right, and you already mentioned her romantic relationship. How is she navigating this? I mean, Gilead not only took or tried to take ownership of her body, but also persecutes queer people whom are labeled gender traitors. How does this trauma affect her relationship with Una?
Oh, it completely affects it. I mean, I think that this is something that will always be a part of her. And honestly, I'm not sure it's that different from some people in the LGBTQ community who are not in Gilead. I think that in America and also lots of places globally, people in our community are seen as gender traitors. So there's that trauma that I love being able to, reflect the world that we live in this fictional world. So even though this is a fictional place, I think a lot of that hurt that people in the LGBT community, some of them carry around with them. And in certain situations when you go into and you have to sort of try to shake off the shame that people try to put on you, Moira's going through all of that. And it carries into her relationship with Una. I think that because her relationship with Una, as of now, especially in the beginning of the season, like I said, not to overuse the word, but there is ease to it, that I think that that's healing for Moira. Being able to see a woman who's not ashamed of her own sexuality, a woman who is able to move through the world and not have that baggage is very healing for Moira.
Right, and to that end, it's one thing to have been a handmaid in Gilead, and it's another to have been a handmaid and queer in Gilead, which is an experience that Moira and Emily also share. And within the LGBTQ plus community, we stick together, or at least we try.
Yes.
There really is a special bond that we share. Would you say that this in part informs the relationship / friendship between Emily and Moira, which I believe is highly underrated?
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Absolutely. I mean, there has to be that there. We think about, especially, in our community, the idea of chosen family. So many of us have been discarded from the families that we were born into. And so when we see this friendship, this camaraderie, this sisterhood between these two characters, it's something very special, and it's something that I think a lot of people from our community can look at and immediately identify and say, I know that, I know what that is. And you're right. I'm so happy that you pointed out, being a handmaid, but also being a queer handmaid is it's because that number one, a lot of the handmaids, if you weren't a handmaid, you'd just be something else. They from you off as a Martha or whatever if you weren't able to bear children. But for us, if we weren't able to bear children, then we would be hung up on a wall. So that's different.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and the show really has tapped into that quite a few times. And there were so many great scenes between Emily and Moira, especially in the third season. So I thought that that relationship is just very underrated. But speaking of them, after June managed to get these 86 children and 9 Marthas, including Rita, across the Canadian border, Emily and Moira are now rehousing the children who do not have relatives in Canada. So my first question regarding that would be how it was for you tapping into that storyline, given that Moira, I'm assuming, relives a lot of the trauma that she endured herself in Gilead, when she's opposite, for instance, that little boy in the second episode who yearns for his Gilead home.
Yes. I think so much when I'm in doing those things, in doing those scenes and working out Moira's work, with the children that she's replaced, that she's putting into different homes, and even before those children got there, she was really working with refugees, anyone who would escape Gilead, and trying to reintroduce them into this new society where you have freedom, which is something that is so confusing and foreign to them. But I think a lot of that for Moira centers around her survivor's guilt. I think, of course, there's like something in her that wants to help, but I think in the back of her mind, it's always, well, maybe it'll be June, and maybe at some point it'll be June that I can like reintegrate, that I can like help place. Maybe it'll be Hannah, and like her like sitting with that child Asher in his home and trying to be soft with him and trying to teach his aunt that like things that have gone on with him. So much of that is because it's inside of her, and all the people that she loved, not all the people, but the person that she loves the most, her goddaughter, they're all still there. So what she can do for these people here is exactly what she wants to be doing for the people that she loves. So she's going to use the most care and like soft, gentle hands, because she wants to be able to be doing that for her people, and she knows she can't, so she'll do it for the people who are there.
And at the same time, she really is the perfect caretaker for Gilead and refugees, because she knows how difficult, or in some cases impossible, it is to actually shake Gilead. She's also very angry at June in the second episode for not thinking her mission through, in the sense that she didn't consider that a lot of children are actually attached to Gilead and would therefore have a hard time tethering themselves from it. Moira even says, "I'm tired of cleaning up her messes." But then we get to the fifth episode, at the end of which Moira and June finally reunite in Chicago after Moira agrees to be part of this rescue task force that helps refugees in the area. Before we get into the specifics, I would like to ask how you and Elizabeth Moss prepared for that reunion scene, given that both of you had to convey such specificity with practically just your faces.
I mean, I wish that I could like tell you some like really special story that we did, but I think so much of the authenticity in that scene is the fact that we haven't seen each other for so long, and you're just there. So how can you really prepare for that when you're in a room preparing, to see each other? So Lizzie and I hadn't really seen too much of each other before that. I'm trying to remember if we had any real flashback scenes before that. I don't believe we did. And we, I think, very intentionally didn't like do anything beforehand to like, just on our own, looking at the script and being ready for it. But I think we tried to make that moment as authentic as possible, and just going through that fog and literally just immediately seeing her was, I think, the key.
Right. And in relation to the quote I mentioned earlier, Moira adds that it's not always a storybook ending when it gets to these when we get to see these reunions. And I would say that is certainly the case when it comes to June and Moira's reunion. Since June is traumatized, she's burdened by this insurmountable guilt of having potentially lost Janine and returning to Canada to Luke without Hannah. But despite pushback from June, Moira really puts everything at risk: her relationship, the continuity of this rescue mission, her life, to get her friend to freedom. So talk us through the complexity of this relationship and why Moira risks everything for her friend, who is so hesitant, to put it lightly, about leaving.
Yeah, it's it's really interesting because we're able to see in that episode a couple flashbacks, right, to them in their apartment. And I love those two, the contrasting elements in those two flashbacks. One is like, they just got their rhythm going. They're just like in the apartment, and you can see the easiness of the friendship, the back and forth. And the other one, there's a little dissonance there. And I love that those two are there because we know that their friendship went on after those two flashbacks. We know how close they are after that. So we're able to see that like a little bit of dissonance it's not like it blew up their friendship. But what has happened now to June in Gilead, having been there, Moira has been in, I'm believing the timeline, been in Canada for 4 years now. So that's 4 years longer that June has been in Gilead. That's 4 years more trauma. And so the June that she is reunited with at the end of episode 5 is not the same June. Is not the June that Moira knows. But honestly, I think that Moira is so determined to get June back. I mean, her whole life revolves around that. Like I mentioned before, the Survivor's Guild and everyone that comes into Canada from Gilead. I believe that, are you still there?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was saying my internet was unstable.
All good.
Is centered around June. So I honestly think that if June, gave up even more resistance, I honestly think Moira just could have like knocked her over the head and made her unconscious and just like dragged her on the boat. There was no way that she was going to leave without her. And also I think for Moira, she justified it in the sense of like everything that she means. Like what almost like a prize she is to get to Gilead. All the like, even the intel that she has, that she could help out, that maybe getting June out would be worth so much more than just getting one other person out. I'm not saying that's necessarily true, but I do believe that had something to do with Moira's rationalization of the moment. There's nothing in that moment that was going to have Moira at all believe the words that Una was saying, was that her life was worth the same as anyone else's. I mean, as speaking as Moira, how dare you say that, you know? So as complicated as it is, I believe that Moira does a lot of maybe even mental gymnastics for herself to make that the most uncomplicated decision of her life.
Right, and it must have been very difficult for Moira to have all these people come over to Canada. I mean, Emily and Rita, these 86 children, even the Waterfords were in Canada, but her best friend wasn't. So
absolutely,
that's why it's such a big moment. But now that they both are in Canada, like June, Moira is the embodiment of resistance to Gilead, and we get to see it this season too, when she's, for example, opposite Rita, and where Rita is not sure how she's going to interact with Serena or which decision she's going to make, but Moira is still she embodies the resistance to Gilead. What does it mean going forward, having these two join forces to burn Gilead to the ground?
Yeah, I think that we will definitely see, you know, going back to what I mentioned about what these last 4 years have been for them respectively, and how they have been two completely different realities. And we will see how that makes them two different people and how that makes them resist in two different ways. I think that we'll see, just like we already have a little bit in episode 6, how their relationship is not, they're just not the same. They're not two puzzle pieces who fit together as easily as they always have. So I think we'll see how they butt heads, you know, in these last 4 episodes we have left. I think we'll see how they butt heads. I think we'll also see, you know, the love that we have grown to know from them. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be the same. I don't think it's going to be what we've always seen from episode. You know, I think back so much to season 1 and those scenes that we filmed pre-Gilead, and it's just not. They're not the same women. You can't be the same women after what has happened, and because the last 4 years have been so different, it's not the same relationship. And so we will be getting to know that as an audience, but also in real time, Moira will be getting to know that, and that is a lot to swallow when you've just been wanting this person back for this long so you can get back to where you were, and then all of a sudden you realize that that's impossible. Yeah, I'm not going to say too much. We'll see.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Gilead transforms you, and that's what the last few seasons have really shown, especially in June. Well, this really is the season of Elizabeth Moss, because she also made her directorial debut with 3 episodes this season. How was it being able to collaborate her on that level?
It was so awesome. It felt like having like an inside person, like at the top, you know. It was, no one knows the show as well as she does. To be an executive producer, to be the lead actress, and to now be putting on these director shoes. It felt, I believe, more comfortable than any other director we've ever had. She knows the ins and outs of this show more than, like, I pretty positively can say better than anyone who's ever directed before. And also there are conversations that I've had with Lizzie, you know, if there's been another director on, I'm able to bring her to the side and kind of have like another conversation of like, hey, I'm feeling this. And like, I didn't have to bring her to the side because like, she's everything. So we were really, really, really able to have some in-depth conversations about not only what is happening in this scene, but who Moira is from the entire 4 seasons put together. So it just felt just a little more holistic, I guess. WHO with her directing.
Well, thank you so much, Samira, for joining us today. And everyone, go to goldderby.com to make your predictions. And before you go, click subscribe to watch all of our great chats with top contenders. Thank you so much.